trusts in God, that God has something coming to make amends for this, and that something, even though Abraham may not have been able to put his finger on it or a name to it, he trusts God. He knows that that's Jesus Christ. He knows that God has a plan, and that plan is Jesus Christ. God in his forbearance passed over the sins previously committed. But one of the neat things about this to me is that as we think about our own salvation, as Christ atones for us, this applies to us too. That God has a forbearance toward us too. We often think, well, yeah, all the sins that I committed before I became a Christian, those have been forgiven. But now I'm somehow responsible for my own sins in the future. Well, you've been responsible for your own sins all along, and that doesn't change. But God's not surprised by your sin. God knows the things that you will do, and in his forbearance has waited for you to trust those things into Christ. He's passed over those sins. This is an amazing text that speaks of atonement. That Christ, who came into the world to live a completely sinless life, died on the cross to pay the debt for sin he didn't commit. To pay the debt for my sin and for yours. And in so doing, absorbs the wrath of God, deflects it for us. Verse 26. It was to prove at the present time that he himself is righteous, that he justifies the one who has faith in Jesus. I want to give you two words. Again, I gave you some Latin earlier today. Now I'll give you some more theological words. And the next conversation you have, you're going to sound really smart, I bet. One of those words is propitiation. You might have heard these before. If you haven't, let me explain. Propitiation is a word that's described that Jesus has propitiated our sin. He has satisfied God's anger toward our sin. Now, at this point, some people begin to say, whoa, I don't really think of God as an angry God. Let me say that I think we should think of God as an angry God, and here's why. If God is all-powerful, all-knowing, able to look at our world is messed up. There's war going on. There's rape, there's injustice, there's children being torn from their parents. Sin has ravished our planet. And if God looks upon the planet and is not angry, what kind of God is that? I think God's anger towards sin is a pledge that He will make it right, that an all-powerful God will not let this sin forever abide. I think it's important that we understand God is angry at sin. But here's the other problem with that is that we also have sin. And so we need someone to satisfy that anger of God. And for us, it's Jesus Christ, who takes our sin upon Him on the cross in propitiation of our sin. The other word I'm going to teach you, though, is imputation. We've talked a little bit about this before in previous sermons, but it means that Jesus takes something that is His and gives it to you so that it can be as though it's yours. He imputes it to you. And in particular, what we talk about is His righteousness, His right standing with God. When you stand before the throne, you don't have to stand on your own merits, but you are imputed with the merits of Christ. You are given Christ's right standing before God. But it goes even further than that. Look at verse 26 at the end of it there. It reads like this. He justifies the one who has faith in Jesus. That's probably how your English translation reads. In the Greek, it reads literally like this. That He justifies the one who has the faith of Jesus. See, we want to claim at least we have our own faith, right? We stand before the throne with the righteousness of God, but we've attained that because we have faith. Even our faith is not our own. Even our faith is the faith of Jesus that is given to us, that is imputed to us. We stand holy on Jesus Christ. Well, let's continue then, because the next question flows right after that logically, and that's Romans 3:27. Then what becomes of boasting? What becomes of boasting? It's excluded. By what law? By the law of works? No, but by the law of faith. For we hold that a person is justified by faith, apart from works prescribed by the law. Or is God the God of Jews only? Is he not the God of Gentiles also? Yes, of Gentiles also, since God is one, and he will justify the circumcised on the ground of faith, and the uncircumcised through that same faith. Do we then overthrow the law by this faith? By no means. On the contrary, we uphold the law. Now remember, when Paul is writing to the Romans, here as we've read it, he's speaking in large part to his own people, to Jewish people, although not exclusively. And to the Jewish people, the law was the cultural, normative way to be and exist in the world. So it's roughly the equivalent of us saying this, that the law is, for us, would be like the cultural Christian norms. What it means to be a good, decent Christian person. And the way you act when you're a good, decent Christian person. And so what we say in our society is that if you're a good, decent Christian person, you ought to get recognition for that, right? I mean, you guys woke up early to come to church. You could have stayed in bed, and you even put on your nice clothes, right? You guys got ready for family lunch. Some of you cooked casseroles. Some of you set the table. You didn't have to do that, but you did. You guys are going to put money in the plate. You're going to sing the hymn. Some people say, well, I'm not very good at singing, but I just do it. I know I'm supposed to, so I sing along. Don't you deserve a little recognition for that? Some of you served on the session and on Presbyterian committees, and you've gone on the mission trips, and you've sung in the choir. Don't you think someone ought to at least pat you on the back a little bit for that? I mean, you're being the good Christian person. Don't you deserve some recognition? Paul says there is no boast. Really? Not even for the people that we think really go above and beyond, the real saints of the church? Shouldn't we lift them up a little bit? There's no boast. There's no lifting anyone in this body above anyone else in this body. The only one that we lift up is Jesus Christ. Is Jesus Christ, and there's a good reason for that too, because if we lift up human examples, then we set ourselves up for wanting to be someone that ultimately fails. But if we lift up Christ, he never fails us. Now, I realize at this point people say, okay, Pastor, I know, you're looking to the Bible, you've got to give us a good religious answer, but here's the practical reality. You have to lift up people who give, otherwise they're not going to give anymore. You have to honor people who give their time and their effort and their energy, otherwise they're not going to want to give their time and their effort and their energy. And you're right. There's a really practical aspect to that. If you honor people who give more money, then they're going to have a tendency to give more money in the future. That's absolutely true. If you honor people who put work and effort and strain into the body of the church, then they are going to want to do that more. They're going to feel appreciated and want to do it. I don't deny that. But here's what I'd say. That though they may give more money and more time and more energy, it does not necessarily mean that they will love Jesus more. And that's why we're here. What you get when you recognize and encourage good religious behavior is religious people. I had a friend who I played football with. He was better than I was. He was a defensive end just like I was, though. And we played on the Commerce High School football team. He was really good. He was all-state. And when we made it to the state championship football game, it was just incredible watching him play the game, like he was born to play football. And he loved football. You could just see it. He's the guy that loved to come to practice, not just the games. He loved to be there and learn the ins and outs of the game. He loved football. And you could really see it when we won that state championship football game. He just collapsed in the middle of the field, tears of joy in his eyes. Never met someone who loved football as much as he did. And he was good enough to go on and play in college. He earned a scholarship to play for SMU as a defensive end. It was the first year that they got off the death penalty, so they were able to once again offer scholarships, and Justin got a full ride to play defensive end for SMU. And after his senior year, he even went into the pros. He's good. He played professional football for a while. But I remember bumping into him. It was probably his junior year at SMU. And I bumped into him at a convenience store at our hometown in Commerce. He got a lot bigger. I guess college does that to you. They really bulked him up. And we caught up with each other. I said, Justin, how are things going? He said, good. I said, how are you liking football? And this man who had loved the sport in high school, just this blank look of despair came over his face. He said, John, I hate football. Justin, what happened here? You used to love football. What happened? He said, when I played in high school, I played because I loved the game. Now I have to play. I have to play to keep my scholarship. I have to play to promote my career. And I hate it. Here's what happens to us. We fall in love with Jesus Christ. We love the Lord. And so we interact with our brothers and sisters out of a great love. But what can happen is we get to a point where we feel obligated to have to do the things that religion calls us to do. To be the person that religion wants us to be rather than the person that Christ calls us to be. So does that mean that everything that we're doing here as a church is just wrong? No, it doesn't. Look at verse 31 as we get near the end today. Paul writes this. Do we overthrow the law, that is the religion? Do we overthrow the religion by this faith? By no means. On the contrary, we uphold the law. See, what we've set up as a church and what was set up as the law, what are all these rules and regulations that come from the Bible? They are God's rules, God's laws, God's regulations. But if you're doing them in order to get recognition, if you're doing them because you have to, then you've missed the point. I'd say this, friends, follow God's law for the same reason that Jesus followed God's law. Because he loved God's law. Now, if you're not there, if you'd say, that's impossible, how do you love law? I mean, come on, how dry can you get? If you're not there, that's okay. Just be confessional about that. Just be honest with the Lord. And say, Lord, I trust in your forgiving blood that it's stronger than every sin I can muster combined. But I struggle with faith. I struggle with being obedient to the law. And hear me, friends. In the midst of that struggle, his grace will be sufficient for you. As we close today, I invite you to close with me in prayer. It's a personal prayer. It's mine. But it might be yours too. Especially if you struggle with faith. Especially if you have struggled doing all that's in this book. Especially to do it because you love it. I understand that. We all struggle with that. I do too. That's why I wrote this prayer, and I invite you to pray it with me, and perhaps it can be yours too. Let us pray. Lord, I want to be honest with you. The best and deepest parts of me loves you and trusts you. That's how I know you've justified me. That's how I know you've made me righteous. But here's the truth. Much of me still wants something very different than your law. Change my heart, God. Change my heart so that I want what you want. And in the meantime, give me patience and obedience.